Sometimes the cruelest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people you love most, the ones who should have lifted you higher but instead dragged you down. Imagine giving everything you have to your family, your time, your effort, your money, only to be laughed at, mocked, and branded with the label you never deserved. That's exactly what happened to me at a family reunion I paid for. The moment they handed me a custom t-shirt, the words on it broke something inside me. But what I did next, what I destroyed in front of their eyes, it was the turning point of my life. And if you've ever felt betrayed by the people you trusted the most, you'll understand exactly why I walked away. My name is Rachel, and I was 29 years old when this all happened. The family reunion was supposed to be a warm, healing memory. I had funded the whole thing, rented out a big vacation house near Lakeview, Michigan, paid for everyone's travel, covered the food, even ordered custom t-shirts as a little surprise. I thought it would bring us closer. But when the shirts were handed out, mine was different. In big, bold, black letters, mine read, "Biggest disappointment." I froze. I didn't argue, didn't shout. I just smiled. Then I did something that would change everything. I pulled out a thick folder of documents I had been saving for this moment, ripped them slowly in half, and walked out. If you've ever felt betrayed by your own family, you'll know what I mean when I say it didn't even shock me. It felt like the last puzzle piece clicking into place, confirming what I already knew deep down. I stared at the shirt for a long moment, like the words had been carved into my skin. Biggest disappointment. My older sister, Marissa, was the first one to laugh. She nudged her husband, saying, "Relax, it's just a joke." Across the table, my cousin Eddie raised his beer and grinned. "Come on, Ratch. It's kind of funny, right?" My parents? They stayed quiet at first. Then my mom gave this soft little laugh, the kind you give when someone makes a bad joke at church. My dad shook his head and smirked like I had tripped on a sidewalk. I nodded. Once. Then again, slower. Right. Funny. I folded the shirt carefully, placed it at the edge of my plate. No one noticed my hands were shaking. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. And here's the part that stung the most. I had paid for everything. The venue, the catering, the decorations, even the matching shirts. The insult they printed on mine was charged to my own credit card. I had spent months planning this gathering. Booked the old lake house they used to talk about so fondly when we were kids. I thought nostalgia would soften them. I thought maybe this time I'd finally feel like I belonged. Instead, I got a reminder printed in black ink that I was nothing more than their punchline. And the truth? I wasn't even angry. I was just tired. Bone deep tired. The kind of exhaustion that settles in your chest and hardens like concrete. So I pushed back my chair and smiled. "Be right back," I said. I walked upstairs to the guest room. Technically, it was my room since I had rented the whole place. I opened my bag and there it was, the folder. Thick, crisp, full of carefully prepared documents. I had printed them on heavy parchment, sealed them in a navy blue folder to match the table decor. I had planned to announce something life-changing, something that would have stunned every person in that room. I even thought about buying champagne for the reveal, but now it all felt pointless. I carried the folder back downstairs. When I returned, nobody noticed me at first. They were too busy taking a group selfie in their brand new shirts. Perfect. I stood behind my empty seat, opened the folder, and started tearing the papers in half. Slowly, purposefully, one page at a time. Marissa turned around first. "Wait, what is that?" Eddie frowned. Is that a contract?" My dad half rose from his chair. "Rachel, what are you doing?" I said nothing, just laid the shredded papers on my untouched dinner plate, smiled one last time and said, "Enjoy the shirts." Then I walked away. No yelling, no slammed doors. Just the creak of the wooden floor, the slam of the old screen door, and the cool night air brushing against my face like freedom. I didn't even grab my jacket. I didn't need it. By the time I reached my car, the first call came in. Then another. Then 3 more. Like a dam breaking. I didn't answer. Not yet. Let them read what I destroyed first. Let them feel the weight of it. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at my hands on the wheel. Too calm. Almost unnervingly calm. Like my body hadn't caught up to what had just happened. But one thought looped in my head. They laughed. My mom. My dad. My siblings. They all laughed at me. Like calling me the biggest disappointment was just harmless family fun. Another one of those inside jokes like Marissa's snarky Christmas cards or Eddie's jabs about me being single. But this time it wasn't harmless. And it definitely wasn't new that I sat in my car that night, replaying it all in my head. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that label on the t-shirt wasn't new. They had been writing that label on me my whole life. Biggest disappointment. It just took bold letters on cotton for me to finally see it for what it was. I could trace it back to when I was 9 years old. That was the year my cousin Eddie broke the neighbor's window with a baseball. He was the one holding the bat, the one who swung too hard, the one who panicked and ran. But guess who got grounded? Me. My parents said I should have stopped him. As if a 9-year-old girl could control an older cousin with a hot temper. That was my childhood in a nutshell. If something went wrong, somehow it was my fault. When I was 11, my sister Marissa lied about failing a history test. She told my parents she had studied with me, that I distracted her. I wasn't even in the same room when she took the test. But the punishment? It landed on me. Rachel, you're supposed to be a better example, my mom scolded. By 12, I had my first real taste of failure. A single C in math. I cried, not because of the grade itself, but because I knew what was waiting for me at dinner. The sarcastic remarks, the sighs, the looks of disappointment. Meanwhile, Marissa could skip half a semester in college and still get her tuition covered. Eddie could wreck 2 cars before 18 and still get new ones handed to him. But me? I was the one who needed to learn responsibility. I'll never forget the year I was 17. I asked my parents for something simple. Not money, just a cosign on a small student loan so I could go to a computer science program. I wasn't asking for charity, just a signature. A chance. They said no. They said I had to earn it on my own. I swallowed it. I nodded. But deep inside I knew. If Marissa had asked, they would have signed in a heartbeat. If Eddie had asked, they'd have bent over backwards. But for me it was always a lecture. Always a reminder that I was the one who had to prove herself. So I worked nights. I waited tables, I stocked shelves. I coded in the quiet corners of a 24-hour library. I survived on 4 hours of sleep most nights. My classmates had parents covering tuition, rent, even vacations. I had exhaustion and determination. And little by little, I built something. At first, it was just a small tech service I ran out of a dorm basement. Fixing laptops, recovering data, helping professors set up websites. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught me things: how to pitch ideas, how to network, how to take rejection and keep going. When I graduated, I didn't have family connections. No trust fund. No backup plan. All I had was grit. So I kept working, and one night a pitch I made landed. A small investor took a chance on me. It wasn't millions, not even close, but it was enough to get started. That was the seed that grew into my company. A subscription-based platform that slowly started gaining traction. First, I told no one. Not my mom, not my dad, not my siblings. Because I already knew what would happen. They'd make it a joke. They'd twist it. Or worse, they'd claim credit for it. So I stayed silent. When my first real investment came through, 6 figures in a single check, I celebrated alone. When I paid off my student debt in one lump sum, I didn't even tell a soul. When my company went viral, I smiled quietly, shut my laptop and went right back to work. Because I knew if I shared it with them, it would be ruined. They always had ways of dismissing me. Marissa would say something like, "Well, it's not like you're saving lives." Eddie would laugh and ask if I was finally ready to get a real job. My parents? They just give me that lukewarm smile, the one that said, "Don't get ahead of yourself." So I kept my victories to myself. But that didn't mean I wasn't watching. I watched Marissa host elaborate parties in apartments I knew she couldn't afford on her salary. I saw Eddie post long, dramatic captions about mental health on Instagram, only to message me privately 2 days later asking for money. I watched my parents struggle with their mortgage, juggling overdue bills and pretending everything was fine, while still buying themselves anniversary cruises every other year. And despite everything, I still helped them. I was the biggest disappointment. Yet I was the one bailing them out quietly. Anonymous donations. Untraceable transfers. Helping them from the shadows. Because some part of me still wanted to believe that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, maybe they'd finally see me. Maybe they'd say, "We're proud of you." But that never happened. The closest I got was last Christmas. I had rented out a ski lodge, planned a whole holiday surprise. My mom told me not to waste my money. A week later, She posted online about how Marissa had treated them to a beautiful family vacation. That was when something inside me finally broke. I decided then, no more hidden giving. No more anonymous help. If I was going to do something for them, it would be out in the open. It would be undeniable. That's why I planned the reunion so carefully. I wanted to reveal everything in one unforgettable moment. I had gone all out. I had hired an attorney, prepared official documents, printed them on fine parchment. One letter cleared my parents' mortgage. Another gifted them early retirement. For Marissa, a down payment for a new home and a better school district for her kids. For Eddie, a debt relief fund and even a job referral if he wanted to start fresh. Each page was signed, sealed, ready to hand over. I imagined the moment so clearly. My mom tearing up as she read the letter. My dad gripping my hand silently, overwhelmed. Marissa admitting she misjudged me. Eddie saying, "Damn sis, I had no clue." I had pictured it all. But instead of that moment, instead of gratitude, instead of recognition, I got a t-shirt that said biggest disappointment. And suddenly everything made sense. That was the real gut punch. It wasn't just the shirt. It was the realization that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, they were never going to see me. Never going to treat me as anything other than the failure they decided I was. That night, as I ripped those documents in half, I wasn't just destroying paper. I was destroying the fantasy I had been clinging to for years, the fantasy that someday, somehow they'd change. And the truth was, I didn't need them to change anymore. I had already changed. I drove away from the reunion that night in silence. The phone kept buzzing beside me, one call after another. Mom, Dad, Marissa, Eddie, they were all desperate to get through. But I didn't answer. Not yet. I wanted them to sit with it, to realize what I had just destroyed in front of their eyes. And deep down I knew they would twist it. They always did. I hadn't even made it to the city limits when the rumors started flying. The first call wasn't from my family. It was from a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. She asked carefully, "Hey Rachel, are you okay? Your sister posted something kind of weird. Said you had a breakdown at the reunion. Just checking in." Breakdown. That was the word Marissa had used. I pulled over, opened Facebook, and there it was. A photo from the dinner table. Everyone wearing their new shirts. Wine glasses half full. Cake in the middle. The caption read, "Some people just can't handle being part of a family. We still love you, even when you self-sabotage." No names. No specifics. But the implication was crystal clear. The comments poured in underneath. "So sorry, girl. Families can be tough. You did your best. Some people are just toxic. Sending you love, stay strong." Every single comment was directed at her. Sympathy for her. Comfort for her. And me? I was already being painted as the unstable, difficult one. Then came the group chats. Screenshots. Forwarded texts from cousins and aunts. My mom had apparently called my aunt sobbing, saying I had thrown a fit and shredded legal papers in some kind of manic breakdown. Eddie even messaged me directly. "You really need help. You embarrassed all of us. We tried to include you and you turned it into a scene. Real classy. Include me." Right. That was their version of inclusion. Handing me a shirt that said, "Biggest disappointment." I didn't reply. Not to Eddie, not to Marissa, not to anyone. Instead, I forwarded the original digital copies of the documents to my attorney. Asked him to timestamp the email. I also looped in my assistant just to make sure everything was backed up and secure. 5 minutes later, she replied, "Would you like me to push the Forbes feature to this weekend? I can reattach the scans." I paused, staring at that email. Then I typed one word. Yes. Because here's the thing. My family had always been good at rewriting history. Spinning stories. Making me the villain. And usually I let them. I stayed quiet, let their version stick, because I thought fighting back wasn't worth it. But not this time. This time I had receipts. The Forbes article dropped quietly at first. No big announcement from me, no dramatic captions. I just shared the link on my personal page. No comment. No tag. Just the story itself. And the headline said it all. The underdog founder who secretly funded her family for a decade and finally walked away. Inside were scans of the documents, signed, dated, notarized. The very same ones I had torn up in front of them. The article laid it all out. The mortgage payments I had made under shell accounts, the anonymous donations that traced back to me, the scholarship funds I had quietly set up for relatives. It detailed my company's valuation, north of $30 million, and the mentorship grant I had started for young coders who'd been written off by their families. And then the kicker, it explained why I walked away. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in clarity. Within hours, my inbox exploded. Congratulations from old classmates. Supportive messages from colleagues. Strangers thanking me for the courage to tell the story. And then came the other messages, the ones I had expected all along. A voicemail from Marissa. Why would you make this public? You're humiliating us. A text from Eddie. Wow. Real mature. Hope you're happy ruining the family name. And from my mom. We need to talk. You misunderstood the joke. We were just having fun. A joke. That's what they called it. Printing biggest disappointment on a shirt at my own reunion. Just a joke. But the story didn't stay small. It started spreading. A popular YouTube channel covered it. Then a podcast. Then a short documentary. People couldn't stop talking about it because everyone recognized humiliation when they saw it. Especially when it came wrapped in the disguise of family. Eddie tried to clap back online. He posted a long rant about how I was unstable, that I was twisting facts for sympathy. Someone immediately replied with a screenshot of the contract I had written for him, complete with dates and amounts. Marissa tried to spin it too, telling extended relatives that I had changed, that the money had gone to my head, that I was using a simple misunderstanding as an excuse to cut ties. But the truth was already out there, and people weren't buying their version anymore. What I hadn't expected, though, were the private messages. Cousins, old neighbors, even family friends I hadn't spoken to in years. One cousin wrote, I always noticed how differently they treated you. I just didn't know the full story. A neighbor said, I remember hearing your mom call you a late bloomer while bragging about Eddie's internship. Funny thing is, I later found out you own shares in that same company. It wasn't just validation. It was proof that people had seen the cracks all along. Proof that I wasn't crazy. But the part that hit me hardest wasn't their spin, or the gossip, or even the sudden spotlight. It was the realization that I had spent so many years trying to earn their approval. I hadn't noticed how much I had grown past the need for it. I wasn't the little girl trying to earn a seat at their table anymore. I had my own table now. And for the first time in my life, I felt peace. Of course, my family didn't see it that way. They sent me a letter. Not an apology, oh no. Just a carefully worded note that said, we're still your family and we love you, and we hope you can move past this. Move past it. Like it was a misunderstanding. Like I had gotten offended over a silly t-shirt and stormed off. A week later, they sent another letter. This one longer, more emotional. Listing all the things they had done for me when I was younger. Meals. Rides. A roof over my head. As if basic parenting erased years of belittling, years of dismissal, years of cutting me down. They never mentioned the money. Never mentioned the documents. Never mentioned the smear campaign they started before I even left the driveway. And then out of nowhere, Eddie posted an old photo of us as kids. Captioned it, Miss my sister. Still love her. Always will. It was bait. A picture-perfect way to flip the narrative again. To make it look like I was the cold one, the one who turned her back for no reason. People tagged me in the post, waiting for my reaction. But I didn't give them one. Because the only people I owed anything to were the ones who stood by me when I had nothing. And none of them were wearing those t-shirts. So I stayed silent. And in that silence, the truth grew louder than anything I could have ever said. 2 weeks after the Forbes article went live, my parents stopped calling. No more texts. No more voicemails. No more let's talk this out. It was as if they had decided I didn't exist anymore. At first, the silence stung. After all, even toxic love is still love. And cutting it off leaves an ache. But soon I realized the quiet wasn't a loss. It was freedom. For the first time in my life, I could wake up without dreading their opinions. Without bracing myself for the next jab. The next subtle reminder that I was never enough. But while I was moving forward, they were unraveling. Eddie's small business, propped up for years by my quiet investments, started sinking fast. I wasn't there to cover shortfalls anymore. And the truth is, his success had always been smoke and mirrors. Within 6 months, he had shut down 2 locations and was drowning in debt. Marissa tried to rebrand herself online, building this image of a supportive, united family. But people weren't buying it. Too many receipts, too many screenshots, too many whispers had already circulated. The audience she craved started drifting away. And my parents, they withdrew. Invitations from extended family slowed. The whispers grew louder at weddings, baby showers, and church gatherings. Everyone had read the article. Everyone knew. They weren't the admired family unit anymore. They were the people who had printed a cruel nickname on a shirt, smiled for a photo, and called it love. Meanwhile, my world opened up in ways I hadn't imagined. The Forbes piece caught the attention of a foundation that invited me to speak at a conference about resilience and innovation. Standing on that stage, telling my story not as a victim but as someone who had rebuilt her life was surreal. I looked out at hundreds of faces, nodding, tearing up, applauding. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the outcast. I felt seen. My company grew faster than ever. Not because of the publicity, but because I was finally leading without that heavy anchor of needing my family's approval. My decisions became sharper. My energy lighter. I even started a scholarship program specifically for kids who had been labeled as disappointments. The irony wasn't lost on me. What my family had once used to humiliate me became the very word that fueled an entire movement. Of course, my family tried one last trick. About a year later, my mom reached out through a cousin. She wanted to clear the air. She wanted to meet privately. No cameras, no lawyers, just us. I agreed. Not because I expected an apology, but because I wanted closure. We met at a small cafe halfway between our cities. She was already seated when I walked in, a scarf around her shoulders, hands clasped tightly on the table. For a moment, I almost saw her as just my mom again. Not the woman who had dismissed me for years, not the one who had called my silence selfish, but the mom who used to pack my lunches and braid my hair. But then she spoke. "Rachel, you didn't have to air everything like that. Families fight. Families make mistakes. But you made us look like monsters." I sat there calm, letting her words hang in the air. Then I asked softly, "Mom, do you remember the shirt?" Her face tightened. She didn't answer. I leaned in. "Do you remember looking me in the eye while I wore that shirt? While everyone laughed? Because I do. And that's the difference between us. You remember what people said about the article. I remember how you made me feel in that moment." She blinked, her eyes watery, but she didn't apologize. She just sighed and said, "You'll always be part of this family whether you like it or not." And that was it. That was all she had to give. I stood, placed a 20 on the table for my coffee, and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. 2 years later, everything looks different. My company is thriving. The scholarship program has grown into a full foundation. I mentor young entrepreneurs who remind me of myself, bright, underestimated again, and still standing. I've built a circle of friends who feel more like family than blood ever did. People who celebrate wins without jealousy, who show up without strings attached, who don't need me to shrink in order to shine themselves. As for my parents, Marissa and Eddie, we haven't spoken. I hear bits and pieces. Eddie moved out of state after bankruptcy. Marissa is still chasing social media relevance. My parents sold the house I once helped keep afloat, but none of it pulls at me anymore. It's just background noise now. Because here's the truth. Family isn't about DNA. It's about choice. About who shows up, about who claps when you succeed, about who stands beside you when the world doesn't. And when I look back at that night, the shirts, the contracts, the humiliation, I don't feel shame anymore. I feel gratitude. Because that was the night I stopped begging for a seat at their table. That was the night I finally built my own. People sometimes ask me if I regret it. If I regret tearing up the papers, going public, cutting ties so sharply. And I tell them the same thing every time. No. Because sometimes you don't get the apology you deserve. Sometimes you don't get the closure you were hoping for. But you still get to choose peace. And peace, I've learned, is worth more than any version of family they were willing to offer me.